Soft music drifts through the restaurant, the kind that pretends to relax people but really just fills the silence between their conversations. The lights are golden, the air heavy with the scent of wine and expensive perfume. Every surface gleams, every movement rehearsed. It is the kind of place where people don't eat to feel full. They eat to be seen. And in the middle of it all moves Kayla Moore, 23 years old, her apron pressed, her shoes too tight, her smile as steady as the rhythm of her steps. She knows every table, every guest, every kind of laugh that hides behind too much money. She's learned how to be invisible and indispensable at the same time. It's Friday night and the restaurant hums with false warmth, the kind that only money can buy. At the corner table sits a group of businessmen, their voices loud, their glasses never empty. Kayla approaches with a practiced calm, setting down plates one by one. Filet mignon, medium rare. Sea bass with lemon butter, Cabernet for the table. Her voice is even, her movements smooth. She turns slightly and that S when one of the men, the one with the loudest laugh, looks her up and down. "You're too pretty to be carrying plates," he says, smiling like it's a compliment. "You should find yourself a rich man." The others laugh, sharp and careless like it's part of the entertainment. The sound hangs in the air, bright, cruel, and ordinary. Kayla feels it hit, but she doesn't flinch. She's heard it before in 100 variations. She steadies the tray in her hands, eyes on the table, voice calm. "I'd rather earn my respect," she says quietly, "than wait for it." For a second, the table goes still. Then the man chuckles, trying to turn the moment into a joke, but his smile wavers. Something about the way she said it, soft but unshaken, makes his confidence crack just a little. He looks down at his wine. She moves away without a word. In the kitchen, the noise changes, metal against metal, the hiss of the grill, the murmur of tired cooks. Kayla sets down the empty tray, exhales slowly. The laughter from the dining room still echoes faintly behind the swinging door, but she doesn't let it in. Instead, she looks at her reflection in the silver of a serving tray. Not perfect, not polished, but real. "Earn your respect," she whispers, almost like a promise. She ties her apron tighter and steps back into the light. At table 9, someone snaps their fingers for water. At table 12, a woman complains that her wine is too warm. Kayla moves through it all. Steady, composed, unseen. She doesn't need to be noticed to matter. She knows the art of quiet strength, of keeping her dignity when others try to strip it away with jokes they think she can to feel. Later, as the night deepens, she catches sight of the same man again. He's talking louder now, his laugh forced. His friends aren't listening anymore. Kayla approaches to clear the table. He glances up, just for a second, and their eyes meet. He looks away first. Maybe he's thinking about what she said, maybe not. But for that brief instant, something passes between them. The recognition of someone who's seen through the noise. When her shift finally ends, it's long past midnight. The restaurant is quiet now, the last of the guests gone, the music off. She helps stack chairs, wipes down tables, her movements slower but still graceful. The manager nods to her. "Good work tonight, Kayla." She smiles, polite, tired. "Thank you." Outside, the streetlights cast long reflections on the wet pavement. The city is alive but calmer, headlights drifting by, laughter fading into the distance. Kayla steps out into the cool night air, pulling her jacket close. Her shoes click against the sidewalk. In her pocket, she carries the tips she earned, folded bills that mean groceries, rent, one more week closer to her dream. She passes the restaurant window and catches her reflection once more. Behind her, the chandeliers glow, the tables shimmer, and she's just a shadow passing through the golden light, but in her eyes there's something unbreakable. Not pride, not anger, just quiet certainty. Some people spend their lives chasing respect through power, through wealth, through the eyes of others. Kayla earns hers in silence, one shift at a time. As she walks down the empty street, the laughter from earlier feels smaller now, distant, almost meaningless. The only sound that matters is her footsteps. Steady, forward, alive. Respect doesn't come from the table you sit at. It comes from the ground you stand on. And she stands tall, even when no one's watching. Because grace doesn't need applause. It just needs truth. And in a world that confuses value with vanity, sometimes the quietest strength is the one that leaves the deepest mark. Kayla disappears into the city glow. Another night behind her, another tomorrow waiting. She doesn't have riches or recognition. But what she has, the self she refuses to trade, is worth more than any tip left behind. When the restaurant closed, the noise faded like a curtain falling after a long performance. The laughter, the clinking of glasses, the music, all gone, leaving behind only the hum of the refrigerators and the soft scrape of Kayla's broom against the tile floor. It was past midnight. The golden glow that had once made the dining room shimmer now seemed cold and distant, a reminder that beauty often hides exhaustion. Kayla Moore moved quietly between the tables, collecting napkins and empty glasses, her reflection flickering in the darkened windows. The world outside was wet, rain running down the glass in slow, silvery streams. She liked nights like this, nights when no one was watching, when she didn't have to smile on command, when she could just exist. On one of the tables near the window, something caught her eye. A leather wallet, sleek and heavy, left behind by the group of businessmen from earlier. She recognized it instantly. The same man who'd told her she was too pretty to be carrying plates. The same man whose laughter had filled the room with arrogance. Kayla sighed softly and picked it up, turning it in her hands. It smelled faintly of expensive cologne and cigar smoke. She could already imagine what was inside. Crisp bills, glossy cards, maybe a family photo to prove he still had a heart. She hesitated, just for a second. Not because she wanted to keep it, but because the world had given her so many chances to become bitter, and she never took them. It would have been so easy, one wallet, one night, no one would know. But she would. That was enough. She opened it, only to check for identification. Inside, neatly folded, was a stack of $100 bills, more than she made in 2 weeks, and a small silver flash drive, tucked into a side pocket. She frowned. That was odd. No one kept flash drives in wallets anymore. Something about it felt personal, important. She closed it carefully and walked toward the manager's office. The door was closed, the light still on. Mr. Grant, the night manager, looked up when she knocked. "Forgotten item," she said simply, holding it out. He blinked, clearly surprised. "You could have just left it in the lost and found," he said. "Yeah," she replied, "but I figured it belonged to someone who'd come looking for it fast." He took it, nodded, and gave her a tired smile, the kind that said, "You're better than this place deserves." She nodded back, wiped her hands on her apron, and turned to leave. Outside, the rain greeted her like an old friend. It fell in thin silver sheets, drumming softly on the pavement. Kayla didn't have an umbrella. She rarely did. But she didn't mind. The city lights reflected off puddles, neon signs blurring into color. Her shoes splashed quietly as she walked, her uniform clinging to her skin. She didn't look glamorous like the people she served. She looked real, someone who had learned that dignity doesn't depend on dry clothes or warm smiles from strangers. As she crossed the street, her reflection shimmered in the wet asphalt, tired, soaked, but steady. She thought about the man's words from earlier, too pretty to be carrying plates. It echoed in her head, but now it felt small, insignificant, because she knew what he didn't. Real beauty isn't about being admired. It's about what you choose when no one is watching. Back at the restaurant, the wallet sat on the manager's desk, untouched. Later that night, Mr. Grant opened it to find identification and the flash drive. Out of curiosity, he plugged it into his computer, expecting to find photos or receipts. What appeared on the screen instead made his breath catch. Spreadsheets, confidential memos, wire transfers, all tied to a company name he recognized. A corporation connected to the man who'd insulted Kayla just hours before. Corruption, fraud, millions shifted through fake accounts. He stared at the screen, realizing that a quiet act of honesty had just stumbled upon something enormous. Meanwhile, Kayla walked the long road home, her steps slow but steady. The rain had softened to a drizzle, misting her skin, cooling her tired face. She passed the bakery that would open in 2 hours, the bus stop where she used to dream of leaving the city, and the corner cafe whose window always glowed like a small promise in the dark. She didn't know what she had just set in motion. She didn't know that tomorrow morning headlines would start unraveling a scandal, that the man who mocked her would soon be answering questions he couldn't laugh away. All she knew was that she'd done the right thing, and somehow that made the night feel lighter. As she turned onto her street, her small apartment building came into view, old, a little worn, but home. She climbed the stairs quietly, dropped her bag on the couch, and sat for a moment listening to the faint hum of the city below. Her hands were trembling, not from fear, but from something harder to name. Maybe pride, maybe relief, maybe both. She reached for her journal, its cover soft and faded from use. She didn't write much, just a few words. Integrity doesn't need applause. Then she closed it and smiled faintly. The rain outside slowed to a whisper. Somewhere, far away, lights from downtown flickered against the low clouds, a reminder that the world kept moving, spinning, rearranging itself around choices people made in silence. Kayla didn't need to know what her honesty had uncovered. She didn't need her name in the news. What mattered was simpler, that she had stayed true to herself, even when no one would have blamed her for doing otherwise. The kind of truth that can't be bought, that doesn't fade under pressure. As she drifted to sleep, the city exhaled with her, a shared breath between two survivors. In the morning, life would go on. The tables would fill again. The laughter would return. But somewhere behind the glittering facades of power and money, one man would wake up to the consequences of underestimating a woman who refused to sell her integrity for comfort. And in that quiet space between thunder and dawn, the rain outside whispered the same thing Kayla had always known deep down, that the smallest, most silent choices can be the ones that change everything. Morning came softly, slipping through the tall windows of the restaurant like forgiveness. The same room that just the night before had echoed with laughter and arrogance now sat quiet, almost reverent. Tables stood perfectly set for the breakfast crowd, polished silver glinting in the pale sunlight. But the first sound to break the silence wasn't a clatter of dishes or footsteps on the marble floor. It was the low hum of the TV mounted above the bar. "Breaking news," said the anchor, her voice calm but charged with tension. Local executive Daniel Cross is under federal investigation following an anonymous evidence leak linking him to multiple cases of corporate fraud. The camera cut to his picture, the same smirking man who had told Kayla she should find a rich man. Now that smile looked different, smaller, nervous, a shadow of its former confidence. The dining staff froze. Even the espresso machine seemed to hesitate mid-hiss. Some guests were already gathering, murmuring in shock, scrolling through their phones for confirmation. The world loved irony, especially when it played out on live television. Behind the bar, Mr. Grant, the restaurant's manager, stood perfectly still, a dish towel in his hands. He wasn't surprised, not entirely. The details were a mystery, but he knew enough to connect the dots. The lost wallet, the flash drive, Kayla's quiet honesty. He didn't say a word. Some truths didn't need an audience, they just needed time to reveal themselves. When Kayla walked in, her uniform neatly pressed, her curls pulled back in a simple bun, she didn't notice the tension at first. She moved with her usual calm, offering a polite smile as she clocked in. Then she saw the screen. The same man's face, the same suit. Only now his name was tied to words like indictment, evidence, and arrest. A soft gasp escaped her before she caught herself. Around her the air seemed thicker, like the whole restaurant was holding its breath. Mr. Grant caught her eye from across the room. "Kayla," he said, his tone unreadable. "A word, please." She followed him into the manager's office, a small, cluttered space filled with receipts, coffee cups, and the faint smell of aftershave. On the desk lay an envelope, cream-colored, sealed with a gold emblem. For a moment she thought it might be a warning, maybe even a termination. But when he handed it to her, his expression softened. "The owner asked me to give this to you," he said quietly. "He wanted you to know that what you did didn't go unnoticed." Kayla blinked, confused. "I didn't do anything," she said. "I just turned in what wasn't mine." Mr. Grant smiled faintly, the kind of smile that came from deep respect. "Exactly," he said. "That's why it mattered." She opened the envelope slowly. Inside was a handwritten note on thick paper. The handwriting was elegant, deliberate. "Miss Moore, in a world that often rewards greed, your integrity reminds us what real wealth looks like. Thank you for reminding this company what honesty means." At the bottom, a signature, the owner's. Below that, a short message in Mr. Grant's own writing. "Promotion to head server effective immediately." For a long moment, she couldn't speak. The words blurred as tears filled her eyes, but she blinked them away quickly. She wasn't one to cry in front of anyone. She folded the letter neatly, placed it back in the envelope, and whispered, "Thank you." Mr. Grant nodded. "Integrity," he said softly, almost to himself. "That's rarer than gold." When she stepped back into the main hall, everything looked different. The sunlight seemed warmer, the reflections in the glasses brighter, the silence somehow peaceful instead of heavy. Her co-workers looked at her curiously, not because of the promotion, but because of the calm pride in her posture. She didn't boast. She didn't explain. She just picked up a tray and started working, as she always did. At one of the corner tables, a group of regulars were still watching the news replay. "Can you believe it?" one whispered. "That man, the one from last night, exposed by his own files." Another added, "Whoever turned them in must have had guts." Kayla passed by quietly, her lips curling into the smallest hint of a smile. She didn't need them to know. The universe already had. Later that afternoon, the restaurant filled again. Laughter, glasses clinking, the rhythm of daily life returning. But underneath it all, something invisible had changed. The air carried a quiet sense of justice, not loud or vengeful, just balanced. Like the world, for once, had remembered how to correct itself. After her shift, Kayla stepped outside. The rain from the night before had left the streets glistening, puddles catching shards of sunlight like broken mirrors made whole again. She paused, taking in the city sounds, distant traffic, laughter, the low hum of life moving forward. She thought of the man who had mocked her, of the wallet she had returned untouched, of the flash drive she never opened. There was a certain poetry to it, how doing the right thing quietly had spoken louder than all his money ever could. At the corner, Mr. Grant joined her, slipping on his coat. "You heading home?" he asked. She nodded. "Yeah, feels like a good day to walk." He smiled. "You know, you could have kept quiet about that wallet. No one would have known." "I would have," she said simply. He nodded again, thoughtful. "That's why I hope you never change." They parted ways, and as Kayla walked down the wet sidewalk, the city seemed to open before her, wide, alive, forgiving. Each step felt lighter, freer. The world hadn't given her wealth or privilege, but it had given her something rarer. Proof that decency still mattered. When she reached the corner cafe, she stopped to look at the news playing through the window. The anchor was still talking about the investigation, the downfall, the irony. But Kayla wasn't thinking about him anymore. She was thinking about every unseen person who did the right thing when no one was watching. Every hand that carried more weight than it should. Every quiet act of integrity that kept the world from collapsing entirely. In her chest, a quiet pride bloomed. Not loud, not showy. Just steady, like the heartbeat of something real. She turned away, the city lights reflecting in her eyes, and smiled. Because sometimes justice doesn't arrive with noise or punishment. Sometimes it comes in the shape of a forgotten wallet, an honest choice, and a new beginning written in gold ink. And as the sun dipped behind the skyline, Kayla Moore, the girl they once ignored, walked home not richer, not famous, but free. Evening settled over the city like a soft blanket, the kind that carries no rush, no noise, just the quiet hum of a world winding down. Inside a small corner cafe, Kayla Moore sat by the window, her hands wrapped around a warm cup of coffee. The golden light from the hanging lamps painted her face in a calm glow, and for the first time in weeks, the lines of exhaustion around her eyes seemed to soften. Outside, the city moved on. Cars passing, laughter echoing from a distant street, the rhythm of life unbothered by one girl's quiet triumph. But inside it felt different. It felt earned. The bell above the cafe door jingled now and then, letting in a rush of cool air, but Kayla barely noticed. Her attention was on the open notebook in front of her, the same one she had carried since college, filled with dreams, grocery lists, and little lessons she never thought anyone would read. Tonight, she wrote slowly, deliberately, letting the words form like breaths. Sometimes the richest thing you can give is what you refuse to take. She looked at the sentence for a long time, then smiled faintly. It wasn't profound in a way that demanded applause. It was simple, honest, like everything she had ever believed in. She thought about the last few days, about how the world had shifted, not with explosions or praise, but with quiet consequences. The man who mocked her was now a headline. The manager who had once seemed distant now looked at her with genuine respect. And she, the girl who was supposed to just serve and smile, had somehow served a greater purpose. Integrity. That was the word that lingered most. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't loud, but it was powerful. Invisible armor that had protected her when pride and temptation had tried to test her. She stirred her coffee slowly, watching the cream swirl into soft clouds. There was a peace in that motion, something meditative, something grounding. For the first time, she realized she didn't need anyone's validation. The truth had already spoken, not through her voice, but through her choices. At a nearby table, two strangers were chatting about the news still making rounds online. Crazy, right? That executive guy. Turns out he was stealing from his own company. Guess karma's real after all, the other replied. Kayla didn't look up, but a quiet warmth spread through her chest. Karma, fate, justice. Call it what you will. She didn't think the world always balanced out, but sometimes, just sometimes it did. She took another sip, closed her notebook, and leaned back in her chair, letting the hum of the cafe wrap around her. A soft jazz melody played from the speakers, and the aroma of roasted beans and baked pastries filled the air. It was ordinary. Beautifully, profoundly ordinary. And that was enough. Mr. Grant entered the cafe a few minutes later, coat still on, tie loosened. He spotted her immediately and approached with that half-smile she had come to recognize, somewhere between admiration and quiet pride. You always find the calmest spots in the city, he said. Kayla looked up and smiled. Calm is free, she replied. He chuckled softly and took the seat across from her. For a moment, neither spoke. They just watched the rain begin again, soft and steady against the glass. You know, he said finally, when the owner read your note, he asked me one thing. What kind of person returns something like that without a second thought? Kayla tilted her head, curious. And what did you say? I told him, he said, looking at her directly, the kind of person who makes the rest of us look small in the best possible way. She shook her head, laughing quietly. I'm just doing my job, Mr. Grant. No, he said gently. You were doing something most people forget how to do. You were being decent. The words settled between them like a truth too simple to argue with. Outside, the rain softened to a drizzle, and the streetlights flickered to life, reflecting in puddles like scattered gold. Kayla thought about how different her life could have been, how easy it would have been to take what wasn't hers, to justify it, to say the world owed her something. But deep down she knew that wasn't who she wanted to be. The world didn't need more people chasing shortcuts. It needed people who still believed in earning their peace. After a while, Mr. Grant stood up. "You take care of yourself, Kayla, and keep writing those notes. The world needs more of them." She nodded. "I will." When he left, the cafe felt a little emptier, but the silence that followed wasn't lonely. It was clean. She reached for her pen again and added a line beneath her previous one. "Some serve meals, others serve lessons." Then she drew a small line under it, as if signing off on a chapter she didn't realize she'd written. The sentence lingered in her mind, its rhythm echoing softly like a voiceover in her thoughts. She imagined all the people she'd served over the years, the kind ones, the rude ones, the ones who looked right through her. Each of them had taught her something about the world and about herself. How to stay kind without being naive. How to walk away from disrespect without bitterness. How to keep her dignity intact in places that tried to take it from her. That was her education, one shift at a time. And tonight, in the soft glow of the cafe, she understood that was worth more than any degree, any salary, any fleeting praise. The rain outside slowed to a stop, leaving the city glistening under the streetlights. People hurried past the windows, umbrellas dripping, laughter carried on the night air. Kayla closed her notebook, slipped it into her bag, and took a final sip of coffee. It was lukewarm now, but still comforting. A reminder that even when things cooled, they could still be good. She left a small tip on the table, even though she knew the staff. It was her quiet way of honoring those who served. As she stood to leave, her reflection caught in the glass. For a moment, she barely recognized herself. Not because she looked different, but because she felt different. Stronger, lighter, whole. Outside, the city lights flickered like 1,000 tiny promises. She walked slowly, umbrella in hand, letting the cool air brush against her skin. In her chest, there was no pride, no self-congratulation, only stillness. The kind of stillness that comes after a storm has passed and you realize you've made it through without losing who you are. The kind that feels like peace. And as she crossed the street, the words she had written played softly in her mind, like the closing line of a story only she would ever hear. Sometimes the richest thing you can give is what you refuse to take. Because in the end, that was her truth. She didn't need recognition or wealth or apology. She had something far better. The quiet certainty that even in a noisy world, integrity still whispered the loudest.